Alright, so this is part 2 of the tutorial for assignment 7, and this is the last one that's left of the 4 that we're working on this week, and this is closure. This is a one that it's going to be really good for you to utilize combining the white and black. And at this point, I hope it's starting to come together for you what Gestalt is all about. It is the overall look of the whole design. So even the word closure would be included in this design. And in fact, if I were looking at this whole thing, the way I have it laid out with just a simple closure, word closure up here with these two, this whole design of this would be terrible. So if I was going to turn this whole thing in as one big design piece, I would have to incorporate other things to make the whole page interesting. But for these, each one of these little squares is considered a complete composition. So we're looking inside just this square as the gestalt of the whole piece. And when you're getting into closure, that's when that whole theory starts coming together, because your eye is completing that shape, even though it's really kind of not there, because it's blending in with what would technically be the background where there really isn't anything or shapes. But the brain is completing that because of where we've placed the black squares behind it. So with this one, I want you to play around with making interesting patterns with this. This is a really good principle that's used when designing patterns. Actually, putting all these together can make an interesting pattern, which hopefully we will be able to get into in a couple weeks. One thing I want to talk about here is this square, because it butts up to the end of this composition. It suggests that this possibly continues. So that's an interesting thing to think about, or cropping as it sometimes is called. So it gives it the feeling like this shape continues out further into space possibly. So that is something to think about and possibly use and manipulate when you're putting this together. Now, the trick to this is just getting your shapes back here together, your black ones, whether you use circles or squares, and then throwing the white one on top. Now, that is obviously when you're looking at this, it looks like there wouldn't be a circle here because it's white and it blends in with the back, but that's just simply knowing your tools in the software and how to manipulate them. I didn't go in and cut out these squares to make it look like the circle would be there, that your brain is completing that shape of. I just put a white circle on top of it. And then I did the opposite over here. I have black circles with white squares on top. So for the one that I'm going to walk you through now, I decided to use the black background in the composition, which again is perfectly acceptable. And I'm going to fill it with these white squares and use the circles to complete the idea of closure as the black circles blend in with the black background. But I wanted to show you how I'm going to start to build this. Instead of making all the separate white squares, I've made my row here. So I'm going to shift click on all of them. Just like in Illustrator, when you shift click stuff, that's how you select more things at once. So I've got all of them selected and I'm holding the shift key down. That's what I mean when I say shift click. You don't let go of the shift key, you hold it down. I have them all selected, so I'm going to hit Control C and Control V. And I have a new row here. Now I just keep moving around until, do you see that red line on the top? That lets me know they're in alignment. You can go up and use the Align tool if you want as well. Now I have 2 rows, so I'm going to go ahead and shift click the rest of these. Now I just made more work for myself because I forgot about the right click and group. So I'm going to have to go through and shift click them all. Do a Control C and a Control V. Now I've got 2 here, and get them lined up on the top, or sometimes it'll go through the middle there. And I need to nudge it over a little bit if you want them to be completely in line like that. Or you can give a little bit of space. It depends on what kind of pattern you want to do. I'm going to give mine a little bit of space. So I just need to do a Control C and V because they're still selected, and I can tell because there's that blue bounding box around them. And move them around till I get them in line. Alright, so now I have my background build. Now I'm going to make my black circles up there with the shape. Grab the circle, and again, if you just click once, you'll get a perfect circle. Obviously I need to fill it with black. Now I'm going to place these around in a pattern, play around with it, till I get it into something that I like. Alright, so for this one I arranged these to make the closure work so that when the circles come together they make another bigger shape down here to somewhat resemble silhouettes of people maybe watching a movie or looking out windows. You are totally allowed to go in that direction too, to make a narrative out of these. They do not have to be all abstract stuff. And you can work what's called organically with this so that you don't actually have it all planned out. You're moving the shapes around, figuring out what works, and just kind of going with it. Or you can have it completely planned and mapped out. That I'm not looking for. What I am looking for when grading this is creativity like this. I don't want to see just shapes thrown together and call it a day. You will get a low mark on the creativity part of this. So that means you've got to take time. You've got to try different things. You're going to have to experiment. See what you can come up with just using the circles and squares and applying these different laws to Gestalt, or Gestalt, depending on who you're talking to. See what happens when you apply that stuff, when you study them and think about them.